Very good. And whilst they're coming up, I just take the liberty of perhaps a little bit of a self-intro. Perhaps it's a blitheringly obvious that I work for Red Hat, and I'm the lead for public policy for the company. But also, I'd like to just riff a little bit on the Thales' CTO points about VMware. I couldn't help it. But size matters, and Red Hat is the largest enterprise open source company in the world. But the size isn't just how big we are and how many thousands of engineers we're pushing upstream. It's also this huge community in terms of KVM, OpenShift, and so forth. And I'd also like to mention that it's not just individuals, which are incredibly important in the community, but also large companies, small companies in Europe, indeed Thales included, who are contributing upstream, hardening KVM, and look at their GitHub repository, really active. So, without further ado, I'll just jump straight into the panel itself. And we have really an eminent group of panelists here to talk through this theme, which is making Europe the world's home for open source. I think maybe a little bit of context is that, if I may, is the fact that in a few months' time, we're going to get a package, March, April timeframe, and it's going to be a competitiveness and sovereignty package. And this includes a number of things which I think are really important to us all, including a definition of sovereignty, leveraging procurement, looking at MMF in terms of its funding, harmonizing the single market, unlocking venture, all good. But I think as we have found time and time again, we need to also work together with the Commission, with DGCAP, but also more importantly, with the other regulators out there to avoid the unintended consequences that come with regulating, especially when it comes to open source. So I think that would be one of the themes we tackle on this panel, the unintended consequences. I don't think I need to introduce anyone on this panel, but I will just by name. So we have from the Open Source Initiative, we have Deborah Bryant. For the Apache Foundation, we have Ruth Sulo. For Drupal, Baddý, Sonja Breider. Also, the OA and Curl's founder, Daniel Steinberg. And also we're fortunate today to also have Fabrizia Benini, from DG Connect, who will be responsible for this call for evidence, which has been mentioned a few times. And just a correction, it's not on Monday, the deadline, it's on Tuesday, isn't it? The 3rd of February. So you still have time to get that together. So I'm going to first of all go straight to Fabrizia, if I may, in terms of perhaps you'd like to just give a little bit of context as to this call for evidence and how important it is to pull in this kind of information from this community, both here and also outside in the FOSDEM community in Brussels. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James.
Nope.
Hello, hello. Yeah. So thank you very much, James, and good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to be here because this is an important moment, not only for Europe in terms of tech sovereignty, as we've heard from our leaders, from our EVP, but also I think it's an important moment for the community. So 2 things. James mentioned a package that is going to come in April. Indeed, that is going to happen. It will be made up of several initiatives put together, and I will be heading the initiative on open source. And let me just tell you and reassure you, we are not regulating. We are not imposing rules. We are not dictating anything. We are, and our main objective is to foster the growth of open source communities in Europe, because we consider them to be absolutely fundamental to be able to work on digital sovereignty and tech sovereignty in Europe. And we've heard from speakers before the very many aspects in which that is a strong tool that contributes to that end result. So what about the call for evidence, which you mentioned? Well, I think that, first of all, I would like to thank the over 1,000 contributors and submissions to that call. It's been open since the beginning of the month of January, and it will run until the 3rd of February. And basically, the call, what does it say? Well, it sets out our initial assessment of what are the needs of the community in terms of the need to scale up, in terms of the need to support, and I'm not just talking about financial support, that is definitely not sufficient. We need structural framework support for the communities to build up. And it asks for your views. So I really do encourage each and every one of you to do so if you have not done so already. We are particularly happy to see engagement from member states, especially those meeting in the EDIC for Digital Commons. And we will encourage each and every region, especially the ones that were here before at the stage opening the event, to indeed share with us your experiences. We need to understand from you, have a greater understanding of what are the hurdles. What is it that exactly needs to be done? And that's in terms of easing legislation, access to procurement, making sure that funding is actually accessible for small players, for SMEs, for small communities of developers, and ensuring that there is the sufficient maintenance over time that will allow us to grow. We are absolutely confident that this is the beginning of a long conversation, because the Commission has issued a number of open source papers, but they are always inward looking. They were looking to what does the Commission do in terms of open source for its own internal processes. This is the first time that we are looking at what is it that the Commission and Europe can do together with the communities, with industry, to make sure that we do develop a software industry that is European and that is preferably based on open software. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. I'm just looking online. We're at, as you say, well over 1,000, 80% coming from EU citizens, 100 or so from business companies and associations. So we need more data, although that is pretty impressive. I don't know what the record is of consultation inputs, but it can't be far off that. I was going to ask you a question about your friends in Digit and the open source strategy, which is now in its 6th iteration, or 5th, going to 6th. And that's been a real license for the Commission to be braver, more courageous on open source, and then move up the value chain in terms of contributing upstream. Given that communication is going to embed the strategy, maybe a little bit of a word on that before.
Well, the communication that is going to come out will be made of 2 parts. The first part is the one that I've just laid out, i.e. the external facing aspects, and then there will be the internal facing, which will build on what has been done over the years. And indeed, my colleagues in Digit are responsible for that. And I'm sure, you know, the world is going just to move forward in the direction of open source use within the institutions, not going backwards. Yeah,
very good. Thank you very much. So I'm going to now turn to Daniel, who's the founder of Curl, also president of the European Open Source Academy. So Daniel, you use a powerful metaphor. Europe is excellent at making shovels, such as critical infrastructure, which includes Curl, but the gold is often mined elsewhere. So what's happening there? I mean, how could this potentially, this future package help? Or perhaps even also, how could it perhaps potentially not help? So, over to you.
Complicated question. But yes, I think, so just to emphasize that Europe is already an excellent sort of source for a lot of good open source. So I think we're already on the right path there. So I think a good part of the explanation on how to go forward is to sort of not break that and rather keep on doing the right thing the right way and solve the problems that are still there. So I think we're on the right track, and we should just make sure that we help all these maintainers, open source projects, even more going forward. Because we're really good at making the shovels, and if we do really good shovels for a long time, there will be gold in the end. And as me, I feel more like I'm working as a plumber here. I'm not the one who's actually making the gold, and I never want to do the gold either. I do the shovels, and I want to do excellent shovels. And I prefer that everyone allow me to do excellent shovels, and then I'm good.
Very good, thank you. Well, if I must say, Daniel is an extremely modest Swede in the sense that I would count you as in one of the sort of top 5 Europeans when it comes to open source contribution and leadership. So really, it's a real honor to have you on stage. So on to Baddý. From the Drupal Association. I think many of us know and love Drupal. Certainly it's well, I certainly think of it as one of the darlings of the European public sector. And yet the contribution is, if I'm not mistaken, primarily local in Europe. The funding comes predominantly from elsewhere. So I'd like you just to talk a little bit about that in terms of these notions like made in, by, etc., and how they could affect or unintentionally cut off contribution globally or even capital, and perhaps even trigger some kind of copycat in other parts of the world who want to follow that route. Over to you.
Yeah, so thank you. I come from Iceland, so I'm happy to see the representation here from Scandinavia. So first of all, Drupal is born in Belgium. Our funder, our project lead is from Belgium, and we are a very large ecosystem existing for 25 years now, and being used by a lot of public sector company and large organizations. So first of all, what I actually just want to say, I heard earlier in the panel that we need to make sure to buy European technology or European software. I would say that open source shouldn't have to choose its home. Open source is a worldwide thing. We are all allowed to participate in open source projects. Yes. So let's first of all just make sure that we don't put in any restrictions, because contribution in our project is coming from all over the world, even though it was created here, and we have a lot of great contributors from Europe. So that's number one. But we have participated in the call, and I want to just mention briefly what we are saying. Because in the Drupal community, we have a contribution system where we are measuring contribution in the project. We are not just measuring the code, we are also measuring non-code contribution, because that is as important to be sitting here and talking about your project. And we do that through a contribution credit system. So we can see, first of all, who is contributing to the project, but secondly, who is also sponsoring that contribution. So we can really measure and see from where that contribution sponsoring is happening. So what I want to say, and what I think it is extremely important for the procurement rules, is that not just put in that we need to buy, you need to buy open source, but also make sure that we fund the maintainers and the people who are contributing to the code. So I think that was the message that we put in. Among with something else, a lot of other things too. But let's, as open source projects, start measuring who is actually contributing in all ways. And then also for the policymakers and the procurement rules, let's make sure that we make requirements that those who are going to be getting the job are actually also contributing back to the product, because that's going to make it a better software and it's going to make it more secure for the government.
Nice. So one of our keynotes this morning, Dirk, said we're in the habit of exporting public money out of Europe and importing dependencies. In many ways, Ruth, this is a case of Groundhog's Day. Open source has, by its definition, started life with trying to and successfully tackling dependencies. And here we are again talking about it. So maybe you'd like to just give us a little bit of an insight, and maybe give an example such as the recent work that many of us in the room have been doing on the Cyber Resilience Act, and the extent to which that's an example, perhaps a blueprint, how to regulate open source, but also how to mitigate and hopefully avoid the unintended consequences for our community, so that we together create a safer, more innovative, and more sovereign European digital ecosystem.
Yeah, is that all? Just a few things.
You've
No
got
problem.
half an hour to this.
So I am delighted to say, I commented to Deb as we were walking down towards the stage that I had already heard so much this morning that I wanted to say. So the good news is that means that a lot of us are thinking along the same lines, that we're largely in agreement. The EU is setting an example with regulation like the CRA, and that is a good thing for the EU. The world now recognizes the immense value of open source software, and then thereby the increasing threats to the supply chain, because you don't threaten something that has no value, right? I loved Aura's spaghetti metaphor this morning, but I would like to apply it in a little bit different way, not as a Microsoft bowl of spaghetti, but spaghetti that is software in general. We can't tease out the open source noodles anymore. And if you do somehow manage to pull out just those open source noodles, then you're probably going to tear some of the others along the way, and you're left with a half-empty bowl, and you're going to have to go make more noodles. So I thought that was actually a really apt metaphor. So since we can't separate it, the open source steward carve-out in the CRA was such a good thing, not only for open source, but for technology in general, because they are so inextricably linked. And beyond the actual details of implementations of the CRA, so I sat on this stage a year ago and talked about how this was going to have to mean increased collaboration, not in the ways that we always have for the last almost 30 years across open source, but among the foundations, among the projects, among the manufacturers, the industry, among everyone, more so than we ever had. And we're already seeing that happen. And the CRA isn't the only impetus for that. It's not the only cause, but it certainly has been a big part of it. Europe has made and will continue to make huge contributions to open source, to technology in general. But digital sovereignty doesn't mean a digital fortress. It means openness. It means benefiting from what has made open source successful for so long. Sovereignty is built on openness, and it means options. It means not being locked in. That's really what that is about. And so we need to be careful not to create friction that will decrease that collaboration that has made us all so successful so far and will continue to be. For the manufacturers, we've seen a large number, and I think an increasing number, as open source has become so much more critical, so much more foundational to their products, of coming in and taking from the ecosystem without putting back in. And I think that the CRA is going to cause an increase in participation, effectively to force them to do what they should have been doing all along, what they haven't been doing all along, but then to realize that so many of the benefits of the resilience of all of the benefits of open source come from that participation. Compliance is going to be expensive, and I don't think we have all of the answers yet to solving that. Existing funding models do not and are not going to really support long-term sustainability in the way that we need for the next chapter of technology, of open source, of software. And it's an interesting opportunity that is going to have to create new funding models and maybe new business models, new opportunities for a lot of folks. So by way of example, one of those ways that we've seen increased collaboration over the last year, 2 years, is the ASF, along with 60-odd other organizations, have been participating in the Open Regulatory Compliance Working Group, working on those best practices, gold standards that you were asking about. And one of those is based around Article 25 and what the role of voluntary security attestations is going to be. That's specifically important that they are voluntary, but having them happen in the community takes it off the plate of the manufacturers. And so that is one example of that kind of way in which doing the work inside the communities takes it off the plate of the manufacturers, perhaps for some opens up a new funding resource, a new business model, a new opportunity, definitely increases participation, and then frees up the manufacturers to work on their differentiation, which is what the benefit of open source has always been all along, and this is just a new way for that to happen. So I hope that will be the effect of the CRA, of the things that Europe is doing leadership-wise in regulatory movement now. And I think that it will mean that the CRA is not it's a floor for security, not a ceiling for collaboration. That's what the CRA will mean for open source, because like open source has always meant, doing it together means doing less alone. As a manufacturer, participating frees up your time to do the things that are important. It is a benefit to all of us, and so ultimately it's going to help us all protect what we have spent the last nearly 30 years plus building together. With Europe leading the way as the originator of that regulatory stuff, but doing so to enable solid, secure software for the entire global ecosystem.
Thank you. Thank you, Ruth. The spaghetti metaphor, I could see the Italians rolling their eyes. How is that possible? But anyway, so the fortress reference you made, I don't know whether folks have listened to the Carney speech from Davos. Pretty extraordinary, but he talks about the fortress and the importance of actually bridges as opposed to fortresses. The political temptations, Deb, which are here, but also elsewhere in the world, the equation that's out there in terms of sovereignty equaling make it here. Maybe you can just talk a little bit about that in terms of what that means for the innovation model of open source, and what you're seeing that suggests supporting sovereignty without going back to the drawing board, and what that sort of path might look like.
So many comments preceded me in terms of the value of open source and the strategy. So I want to start by saying thank you for the public consultation. I know OSI is responding. To frame a couple of comments, I'm going to try to offer a couple of suggestions from my experience. My experience in open source spans about the last 30 years. About a decade of that was in the public sector, about a decade was in academia, another decade in private industry, so I have an ecosystem view of how open sources work. Today I'm the interim ED for OSI. About half of our board members are from Europe. We also have policy folks in Europe too, so we're deeply invested as an international organization. Despite the fact we're based in the US, we have a global remit. I wanted to make a couple of suggestions, and I think that there's no better way to learn than from someone else's mistakes and someone else's successes. So I had a couple of ideas as I listened to some of the speakers. One of the things that came up in the earlier conversation in software was standing up more of a venture capital market in Europe, which exists in the US. And although it is true, it has contributed significantly to the economy, there's also cautionary tales from that, and that is that one of the most important elements of open source software and its freedom that often gets overlooked are licenses. The thing that we rely on, that we don't have to relitigate, that you can go have the code, use the code, fork the code, put the code where you want it to live, where you want it to be served from. There's been a trend in the US where we've had a number of companies as startups start with open source licensed software, build a community around it, build an economy around it, build their business around it, and then change the license. This has created a great deal of heartburn with the community that contributed, with our customers who thought they'd have more flexibility. So my encouragement is to avoid any temptation to create any kind of a new license that restricts. The openness is the key component to being able to leverage and exploit the value of open source. So a couple of ideas. One of the things that we've seen in any country is that the most value that any public sector organization or a company extracts from open source is to actually participate in it. And I think Europe has an opportunity to create a culture of participation. It's really critical if you look at your ecosystem. You have such an incredibly strong ecosystem in terms of contribution and code development. We can all do better on talent and skill building. But participation also includes financial. So if you look at a solution to some of your challenges ahead, we know that financing is certainly, and sustainability is certainly a challenge. In the US, there really has been very rare direct investments in open source software by the federal government. It's it's very rare occasion. They have relied on the commercial industry to support open source software for decades. And that's been successful to a degree. There's a number of, present company included, there have been a number of actors in the commercial space that have been big supporters that both open their checkbook and contribute volumes of engineering code. Red Hat is an example. Their largest engineering center is here in Europe. And those code contributions are critical, financial contributions are critical, but we're seeing a trend in the US over the last several years where when companies who have been big contributors to open source have done reductions in workforce, they've laid sometimes their open source program office and their open source capabilities to waste. It's become more challenging for foundations to raise funds, and it's a concerning trend for me. So as you think about your strategy going forward, let's make sure that we're bringing the entire ecosystem around and inculcate that culture of participation. There's no better way to learn from, build skills, influence governance in a project from wherever that code comes from than to participate directly. Another lever you might use, we've talked about procurement, and a couple of ideas for procurement are both carrots and sticks. So if you can find a way to get more funding lower into the lower levels of the ecosystem where development's been made, that's great, and I'm sure we'll have more conversations. We've been talking about that with the European Commission for many years. But the other idea for your larger vendors, traditional vendors that have been leveraging open source software as part of their solution stack, think about also incenting those companies in Europe to be able to share their financing, their funding, their contributions to open source. You may even give them a preference in a procurement process. So at all levels of participation, you have a way to incent people to join. Drupal, by the way, is one of my favorite use cases in building an ecosystem because it reaches so far. And the Drupal credits model may be a great way to extract and replicate that to have an objective way to measure whether a company is contributing to the open source community. I think there's a couple of my quick thoughts. I know you're running behind time, so I'm going to give you some time
thank
back.
you. And also thank you for mentioning actually Red Hat's largest engineering center is here in Europe. Actually, the KVM maintainer, Paolo Bonzini, he's in the audience, but yeah, he's based here. And that's one of the reasons why Red Hat picked Europe as being its lead hub. It just looked at the Git repositories, saw that the contributions were off the scale, and said, that's where the talent is, we'll go there. So despite being a US parented company, that is where the decision and the strategy is headed. So I would like to just sort of wrap up and maybe just steal an idea from Shane, the previous moderator, did a much better job than me, by the way, as moderator, and that is to kind of ask each of our panelists for a statement, a call to action, both in the last few minutes that we have on this panel, and possibly the best way of doing it is in reverse order. So if you'd like to get us started, thank you.
Thank you, James. It's always difficult to wrap up such an interesting conversation, I think, in one single phrase. But I think that the most important thing here is the word community. Developers, the community of developers, that is the key richness of Europe. It's a vivid community, it's an active community, it is over 30 million people of contributors. And I think whatever it is that we do, and there are many things that I've already listened to that indeed is the way in which we are going, will be done with the community, not over the community. And because that community is an open community and it serves both public regions and states and public governments and public government in a sense, it is also a key element for private development, i.e. for the very strong industrial verticals that we have in Europe. And so therefore, two words, community and participation. I so much liked your words and your call for a stronger participation. Thank you.
Thank you. Baddý.
Yes, I just wanted to if you want to read up on the proposal that we've made, Dries, our project lead, has a blog that is called Dries, DRI.es. So he's also written multiple blog posts about this topic. So just please go there and look at it, read it, and see what we in the Drupal project are doing. And then just participate and become a maker. And I just want to say thank you to the European Commission. You are a big user of Drupal, but you are also, have over hundreds of developers. There was a government summit yesterday. There is, just, I think, becoming a maker, not just as a company, but also as an active user of the software. So thank you for that.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch, what was the point you made about your colleague? What was the...
Dries.
Dries?
Yeah. That's just look him up, project lead, and he wrote just a blog post a few days ago about the proposal that we are making.
Nice, thank you. Deb.
So our proposal can be, I think, is it published yet? Will be published, if not already published, certainly by the deadline. It is at opensource.org, so you're welcome to do that. I think my closing comment would be, please remember that open source has always been a global activity. That's been from Berlin to Sri Lanka to around the world for many years. And it gives me a lot of hope in a world that's fraught with other tension, to know we can continue to participate together. I hope that any legislation and regulation always considers that the core of what's happening is at the developer level, and that kind of collaboration is really incredibly important to innovation and continuing to grow the ecosystem to public benefit.
Thank you. Andy.
Yeah, I would also like to emphasize there's no borders. And in an open source project, typically we don't care about countries, regions. That's why it's a little bit weird to talk about European open source, because I often take offense when people ask, where are your projects from, right? Yeah, I may live in a country, but that's not my project. The project is everywhere or nowhere. And I want to go back and say that what we need to do to make open source thrive even more is, again, back to participation, back to being an active customer and everything, because we're going to see legislations like CRA going to make sure that we emphasize security, that the products are good and secure to use. But we also need to make sure that they are sustainable, right? If you build a product, anything today that relies on open source, which every product does, right? You may want to make sure that all those things you actually build upon, that they continue to exist and thrive. And in 2 years, when you want to do the next version of your product, it would be helpful if those components were still alive, right? That would be good. Thanks.
And I'll just underline all of that, especially if Fabrizia used the words community and participation, but I want to focus on the word collaboration, because I think it's really interesting. It's easy to forget, because it is so important to all of us, that collaboration is not actually part of the open source definition. It is just the fantastic side effect that has made open source so successful that we're in this room having this conversation. And increasing that collaboration across the communities, the projects, the foundations, the industry, the OSPOs, the government organizations, all of those, it's what's going to make open source continue to be a successful fundamental part of the technology that we all rely on every day for absolutely everything for the future. And that includes not only across projects, communities, industry, but across geopolitical borders.
Fantastic. So I have a community participation, Theresa's blog post, global activity, no borders, sustainability, collaboration, and just a sort of final thought, maybe in the context of open source, we should be talking less about made in, but contributed from. I think that's possibly one of the takeaways I have from this panel. Thank you.